Hello, good afternoon and good morning to you all. I am Masanori Kobayashi, Senior Research Fellow of the Ocean Policy Research Institute of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. Today, once again, we welcome you all to the Japan-Norway Sustainable Ocean Policy Forum 2022. Yesterday, we had discussions on sustainable ocean management and marine spatial planning. And today, we have a pleasure to have distinguished speakers to address sustainable fisheries and international partnership. At the outset, I have a distinct pleasure and honor to introduce Ambassador Inga Nihamau of Norway to Japan to make opening and welcome remarks. May I invite Ambassador Nihamau to take a floor.
Dear everyone, good afternoon. My name is Inga Nihamad and I'm Norway's ambassador to Japan. On behalf of the Norwegian Embassy and the Ocean Policy Research Institute of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to day 2 of the Japan-Norway Sustainable Ocean Policy Forum. If you are logging on today for the first time, welcome. If you followed our interesting discussions yesterday on sustainable ocean management and marine spatial planning, welcome back. Today, we will concentrate on one specific and very vital area of ocean policy, namely fisheries. Fisheries are an essential source of nutrition for the world's population. For many countries, including mine, it is also a critically important part of the economy. Last year, the Norwegian fisheries sector contributed 42 million meals of seafood to domestic and international markets every day. Globally, fisheries employ millions of people and they feed billions. The world's fisheries are facing a range of challenges that require serious attention: overfishing, unsustainable fishing practices, and the degradation of the marine environment. Overcoming these challenges and making fisheries sustainable cannot be done by one country alone. Fish stock management and marine pollution, for instance, are by their very nature border-crossing issues. Global problems require global solutions. We must work together. This is why Norway initiated the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, or the Ocean Panel, as it's called. Both Japan's and Norway's prime ministers participate. The panel has formulated an ocean action agenda with a number of points on sustainable fisheries that make common sense to all. All countries can and should take these action points to heart and implement them. Go to oceanpanel.org and see for yourself if you have not done so already. Norway and Japan are two advanced and large fishing nations. For thousands of years, we have relied on the sea for our nutrition and prosperity. We have been facing sustainability challenges for several decades already, and we have learned a lot from them. In our forum today, we have several highly knowledgeable speakers and panelists from both countries. They will share their perspectives and experiences on how we can build sustainable fisheries for the future. I look forward myself to gaining new insights, to learn and to be inspired. And I'm sure today's gathering will put forward a number of great ideas about how Norway and Japan can continue working together. Both countries aim to achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 14, which reads as follows: conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. It is a broad agenda. Thank you for your attention, and please enjoy the forum.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Nihama, for underlining the importance of our discussions for sustainable fishery and achieving SDG 14. As yesterday, Norway and Japan athletes made a big jump in Beijing, and we certainly want to continue our collaborations to achieve a sustainable ocean and fisheries. I look forward to receiving your insight and suggestions as to how we can further promote our mutual collaborations for sustainable ocean and fisheries. Once again, thank you very much for your very enlightening opening remarks. Then I would like to briefly mention the kind of context of our discussions. The Ocean Policy Research Institute of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation has been working for the sustainable fisheries and elimination of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. OPRI, Ocean Policy Research Institute, is a part of the number of important international groups and networks, including the Advisory Network for the High-Level Panel for Sustainable Ocean Economy that have launched the Policy Recommendation Report, as well as Blue Paper on the suggestions for eliminating IUU fishing. We are also working under the framework of the Friends of Ocean Actions of the World Economic Forum, where the elimination of IUU fishing is a vital role. For domestic and national Japanese stakeholders, we have been having policy dialogues with Japanese and non-Japanese overseas partners on sustainable fisheries and elimination of IUU fishing. Today, some of the collaborators and the partners who are working with us, or we are working with them, will speak at this seminar as well. So with this, I have now the distinct pleasure to introduce Mr. Takashi Koya, Director General of the Fishery Agency of Japan, to give us his presentation for the keynote panel. May I invite Mr. Koya to take a floor.
はい、聞こえますでしょうか。
はい、聞こえております。
Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you clearly. Good afternoon. I am Koya of the Fisheries Agency of Japan. I'm a Director General. Thank you very much for the invitation. The ambassador just mentioned that the management of fishery goes beyond the ability of the single government. I 100% agree with that. In fact, because of the challenges that we are faced with that go beyond our capability to dealing with that alone, I'd like to discuss the magnitude and the nature of the challenges that we are faced with. I believe we have received the presentation material. Yes, this is it. First, in 2020, the new Act on Fisheries was introduced. This is based upon MSY for fishery resource management, maximum sustainable yield. In fact, that is aligned with the principles embraced by Norway for the fisheries management. That's the gist of the amendment of the new law. And in fact, we look to Norway and its system for management in 2018. Back then, the Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Fishery visited Norway, visiting aquaculture facilities as well as research institutes and laboratories. And he led the delegation, and I was a member within that delegation. After the minister left, I went to Bergen to stay at the research institute to learn about the fishery management system in Norway. And I really learned a lot. Therefore, in the context, if you take a look at the fishery management system in Japan, I would say that it is ingrained with the genes or DNAs of its counterpart from Norway. Of course, those DNAs or genes have to express in the right way, and that's what we are striving for. But then comes an issue. That is, even when Japan strives alone, given the situation that Japan is in terms of a geopolitical situation, fishery resource management will not work well. And that's a challenge that we are faced with. As you see here, to the north, Russia, North Korea, and then comes South Korea, and then China, Taiwan. In fact, 5 countries and economies have their waters adjacent to ours, and then to the east, it is faced with the high seas, and therefore we need coordination with relevant countries and economies for fisheries management. Otherwise, it will not work. Because it is not working well, what kind of challenges we are faced with? That's what I'm going to specifically talk about. There are 2 of them. One of them is about the waters that is adjacent to Pacific Ocean according to Article 64 of UNCLOS, Regional Fisheries Management Organization. If it is not working well, then what happens? That's the first example. And then comes the Sea of Japan. This is according to UNCLOS Article 63, where stocks occurring in the EEZ of 2 or more coastal states. In that situation, what kind of arrangement is appropriate for a conclusion? And in fact, that kind of arrangement is not established yet, and in the absence of such an appropriate arrangement, what happens? That's the second case study that I'd like to explain. Talking about Pacific sorry, it is not found in Norwegian waters, but for the Japanese consumers, it is like a herring for a Norwegian. It is such an important species for the Japanese, and they're spawned in the waters near Japan, and in early spring, they would migrate into high seas, and then in autumn, they comes back to waters near Japan. Originally, Japan and Russia used to harvest these resources within their EEZ, but then came China, Taiwan, fleets from other countries started to be engaged in operation in high seas. In other words, such harvesting operation would intercept the stock resources that would be in the process of migration. You see dots on the right in a circle. They represent locations of the IUU fleet operations. You see it is so densely packed, and as a result, migration back to Japan would be lost. And even before that, I have to say that the stock status has deteriorated. As you see here, the NPFC, the acronym that you will find on the right top, it's an international or regional fisheries management organization, which was established in 2015. It covers the high seas only, and the conservation and management measures came late. As you see on the left top, the biomass of Pacific sorry it is declining. As a result, the catch has dropped sharply accordingly. If you take a look at the bar graph in the bottom, in the left, red represents catch by Japan, and then gray, that's Russia. Those two countries used to operate and harvest soy only in their EEZ, but then came Chinese Taipei and China, and their harvest in high seas has increased so much so that the migration back to EEZ has dropped, and as a result of overexploitation, the overall catch also dropped, as you see here in this graph. And talking about NPFC, it was late in coming with the bold measures. In 2019 and 2020, they adopted the measures for management, but I would say that they were rather belated. They were insufficient so that they failed to stop the declining of the stock of soy. So this case indicates that even when the RFMO is established according to Article 64 of UNCLOS, without clear decision-making, you cannot stop decline of the stock status or stock. Therefore, for RFMO to function properly, what kind of cooperation, coordination we can pursue? That's a major question that we have to pursue. This is another example. This is about the flying squid. As I said at the outset, in the Japan Sea, there are 4 countries whose EEZs are surrounding this area without high seas, and therefore, according to Article 64 of UNCLOS, we cannot establish regional fishery management organization, and therefore, as long as each country is implementing proper management measures in its own EEZs, that will be okay, but it is not the case because of the unique geopolitical situation of those countries concerned, and therefore the biomass of the flying squid is continuously declining. And it is only South Korea and Japan that come up with the fishery statistics, and as you see there, there's catch is declining. So much so that now the catch is about 1/4 of what it used to be. What is the cause of this? Because this area is close to waters of North Korea, and the Chinese fleet received license from North Korea and enter into their waters. According to Security Council resolution of United Nations, North Korea cannot engage in issuing licenses. Despite that, they are issuing licenses in violation of the resolution and issue licenses, permits to Chinese fleet, and China is expanding its operation. And the chart on the left, it is rather difficult to see. It is about the Global Fishery Watch, the international NGOs that are following the fleet that is in operation in North Korea by looking at AIS data, and they concluded that it is most likely that most of the fishing fleets are coming from coastal communities of China. And those fishing vessels Their numbers coming from observation would lead to the estimation of the annual catch, which is about 150,000 tons. That is the catch likely to be harvested by Chinese fleet in North Korean waters. As a result, there is no way to stem the declining of a flying squid stock, and according to TAC, total allowable catch system, that's what Japan and South Korea are implementing, and despite such management efforts, their resources are being compromised. According to UNCLOS Article 63, we realize the need for establishing the regional consensus for arrangement. Thus, we talked to South Korea and Russia for such an arrangement, but North Korea, given its unique geopolitical condition, such efforts to establish such local arrangement is rather difficult to establish. I've so far shared with you the challenges that we experience. Those are direct examples, the cases that we experience. If I may add, to prevent such illegal fishery operation, the RFMO's original arrangement, as well as the traceability system, traceability enabling system to accelerate such efforts are required. And therefore, for traceability of fishery products in Japan, to enable that, the system for traceability was introduced according to the new law that was introduced recently. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Koya, for giving us an update about Japan's fishery policies and seafood fishery resource management. I understand that this cannot be done by a single country, but have to be done jointly with neighboring countries and members of the international communities. Sauri and the flying squid, some of the examples that are subject to the international relations and the geopolitics. We will get back to you about feedback and the questions from the audience. Once again, thank you for your presentations. Next, may I invite Ms. Liv Holmehol, former National Director of Fisheries of Norway. As Mr. Koya mentioned, Norway is kind of instructor for the Japanese fishery policies. We are very much interested in hearing from you about the perspectives for achieving sustainable fisheries. Ms. Holmehol, please take a floor.
Thank you, and good afternoon or good morning from Norway. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to share some of our experiences in management of fisheries. I've been working in the Directorate of Fisheries for 18 years, 12 of them as Director General. And our overall objective is to manage the seafood sector in a sustainable way, and at the same time to establish regulatory measures that will contribute to a profitable industry. And our role is to give input to the policy-making processes, for instance, policy proposals, statistics, and different kinds of analysis, and to implement regulations by handling applications and conduct monitoring and control. Director General Takashi Koya has already talked about challenges we face when nations share fish stocks. And Norway shares about 90% of the fish resources with our neighboring countries. An international cooperation and a well-established system of international sea law is of vital importance to us. And I would like to use the cooperation between Norway and Russia as an example on the collaboration we see is needed when countries share fish stocks. Formal cooperation on fisheries can be traced back to 1958, when the Soviet Union and Norway signed an agreement on research in the Barents and Arctic seas. The establishment of national economic zones laid the foundation for even broader cooperation. And we've had a joint fisheries committee negotiating about annual quotas since 1976. The committee appoints working groups that work through the years on improving common technical regulations like requirements on fishing gear, minimum size on fish, conversion factors, and cooperation on control. This work, of course, with a little help from Mother Nature, has led to quite healthy fish stocks in the Barents Sea. This is an illustration of our overall management regime. The main elements are research, data, regulatory measures, control, and sanctions. We are dependent on research to have a knowledge-based management. However, scientific advice is not enough. We need data about actors and the fishing activity as well. Furthermore, we need good regulatory measures, a system that enables us to control compliance, and finally, effective sanctions for violations. National and international cooperation is essential. Different authorities have to work together to secure a legal framework that's comprehensive and efficient, and we aim at achieving level playing field. And interaction with different stakeholders is important in order to create legitimacy for the regulations and transparency about governmental decisions. This is a figure showing the Norwegian fishing history. The blue-green area is the total catch from 1945, and we can see how it fluctuates in peaks and bottoms until the beginning of the 1990s. In the period before 1965, the annual catch was fairly small. After the invention of several technical equipment, the catch capacity increased rapidly. The following decades, the fishing fleet found and caught one stock after another. Several fish stocks were overexploited, with herring as the most well-known. After the quota system was established from 1980 and onwards, we see a much healthier fishing sector in Norway. The yellow line is the development in the number of fishermen, from 120,000 in 1946 to around 11,000 last year. And the white line is a crude way of illustrating the change in efficiency in the fishing fleet. In 1945, the average annual catch per fisherman was around 10 tons. 76 years later, it was more than 220 tons. In a way, you can say that the price we had to pay to get the sustainable and profitable fishing fleet without subsidies is fewer fishing vessels and fewer fishermen. So how have we regulated our fisheries the last decades? Only professional fishermen on professional fishing vessels can get access to the quota system by getting a license, and the number of licenses is limited. This is done to keep the capacity in the fishing fleet in accordance with available resources. All commercially important fish species are regulated by quotas. And we split our part of the agreed TIC down to group of vessels and then further down to each fishing vessel. We have also different technical regulations like ban on discard and minimum fish sizes. The fishing fleet has to fit their fishing gear with devices to fish as selectively as possible, for instance, to sort out juvenile fish or unwanted bycatch. The establishment of marine protected areas is another part of a sustainable management. And the Directorate of Fisheries can close fishing grounds temporarily in order to protect juvenile fish. We also have areas closed on a permanent basis to protect vulnerable habitats. Director General Takashi Koya has already talked about IUU as a global challenge, and we totally agree. This is a challenge that needs to be addressed both nationally and in an international collaboration. And our experience is, not surprisingly, that it's far more efficient to prevent illegal activity than running after it. We aim at implementing basic control points through the value chain from sea to market. The core area is where the outtake of the fish is measured as basis for quota deduction. And for us, this is at the time of landing. All catches are sorted and weighed immediately by the fisherman and buyer, and they are both responsible to register all relevant information on an electronic sales note that's immediately forwarded to the Directorate of Fisheries. And information from this sales note are available on our website. Based on risk assessments, our fisheries officers inspect landings. But as we only have capacity to be present at relatively few of the total landings, we also need to control points before landing to reduce the risk of illegal landings and to improve the basis for risk assessments. This includes requirements on satellite tracking and electronic logbooks. And our Coast Guard will control the fishing operations for both Norwegian and foreign vessels, again, based on risk assessments. On the other end of the value chain, control points should also be introduced to reduce the risk of black landings entering into the value chain. Transparency and exchange of data between different authorities, both nationally and between states, are important to prevent IUU. A brief look into the future. New technology could be used for documentation and tracing of fish products, from harvesting to consumption. To be able to tell the story of the fish will probably be a competitive advantage in the seafood market in the years to come. My final figure shows the result of our fisheries management, or at least two possible indicators. The blue-green area is the spawning stock of the most important species in our waters. The orange line is the average operating margin on Norwegian fishing vessels. As you can see, both lines are moving upwards with some setbacks. We are, in spite of all, talking about harvesting of living marine resources, dependent also on natural fluctuations. To sum up, we have good natural conditions for fisheries in Norway. We have developed our management regime over decades. We have made mistakes and learned the hard way. We know that climate changes might affect the ecosystem and conditions for fisheries in the future. The seafood industry worldwide is also dependent on clean oceans. So we still have challenges both at home and in the global context. We do not have all the solutions. However, I hope my little speech leaves you with the impression that it's possible to build a management regime step by step with the overall goal to produce food from the ocean in balance with the environment. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Liv Fjord, for highlighting the key features of Norway's fishery policies. I see that Norway collaborates with neighboring countries such as Russia and also I think very important to know that you emphasize this control, enforcement, sanctions, and it's interesting to see this per capita fisherman catch is one of the very important indicators. Prevention is more effective than chasing culprit of IUU fishers. I think you have shared with us a number of important perspectives. Please allow us to get back to you about questions. And once again, thank you for your very important presentations. Next, I have a pleasure to introduce Mr. Kazuhiko Nakamura, Deputy Director General, Economic Affairs Bureau, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to give us further input on Japan's fisheries policies and the international cooperations. Mr. Nakamura, please take a floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kobayashi, and thank you very much also for the very insightful presentation by Mr. Koya as well as Ms. Holmefjord, which was very insightful. I'd like to present you today what Japan does to address one of the most acute challenges we face in terms of fishery, which is the IUU fishing. Next page, please. It consists of three parts. Firstly, I'd like to explain why and how the IUU is the issue of global concern. And as the second part, I'd like to explain what Japan does to address this issue. And as a sort of conclusion, I'd like to elaborate a bit what more should be done to strengthen global response to the IUU challenges. Next page, please. Let me start by why and how the IUU is the problem. Although I put a global threat for sustainable fisheries, the IUU fishing is actually a much more multifaceted problem. Please have a look at the diagram in the center left of this slide. You easily understand, I presume, that the IUU fishing is a challenge for the sustainable use of marine living resources. That's clear. The IUU fishing is also the challenge for the environmental protection because in many cases the IUU fishing vessels are not regulated in terms of ecological standards, etc. And it also poses the food security, particularly for local coastal states, particularly small island states dependent on fishery products. But not only that, for example, although we often lack quite accurate data about that, there are some sporadic reports that some IUU fishing vessels involves a kind of forced labor, meaning that the operators of such vessels employ in some cases, crews with very low salary under dire conditions. And the IUU fishing vessels have become also in some cases the source of revenue for criminal groups. So it has relations with the transnational organized crime. And in addition to that, in some regions, for some countries, IUU fishing vessels are used even as a tool for creeping territorial or maritime boundary claims, which means that first came the IUU fishing vessels, then came Coast Guard vessels, and someday Navy vessels. So, that is why we consider that the IUU fishing is really the global issue, but with significant regional impacts. The map on the right shows in which areas of the world we witness more IUU fishing cases than others. And this map clearly shows that on the one hand, the Indo-Pacific region, and on the other hand, the Southern Atlantic is affected by such IUU fishing practices. We understand that is precisely why the SDG target 14 very advocates the international to end IUU fishing, as explained by Ambassador Nihama at the very beginning of the session. And we also welcome and making efforts ourselves to put this question on the highest among the agenda of the international forums and panels, such as G7, G20, APEC, as well as Ocean Panel, where Norway is definitely taking very positive initiatives, and we appreciate for that. But at the same time, we also face barriers, or I should rather say obstacles, for combating such IUU fishing, which is firstly, the political will is insufficient, at least in some fishing nations. And the data transparency is also insufficient. And particularly in some affected countries, they lack law enforcement capacities. Next page, please. So to address these challenges and to surmount these obstacles, Japan is making efforts in two folds. Firstly, bilateral cooperation by providing assistance to developing countries, which means affected countries affected by IUU, to strengthen their law enforcement capacities by providing monitoring vessels or providing capacity building technical assistance programs to Pacific, African, and ASEAN countries, as shown by the photo below. And we also, Japanese fishery agencies have also conducted close consultations and bilateral sort of declarations to enhance cooperation with fishery agencies of other partners, such as with EU, US, and Thailand, which at the same time intend to improve data sharing, data transparency, and in terms of Thailand, to strengthen law enforcement capacities. Next page. And as the diplomatic authorities, we also making extensive efforts in the multilateral field to kind of mainstream this issue. And in doing this, we attaches particular importance to deepen and improve our conservation and management measures in the framework of regional fisheries management organizations, RFMOs. And particularly in the North Pacific Fisheries Commission, we have led efforts among members to establish the IUU vessel list. And also in the Western Central Pacific Fisheries Commissions, we have led the discussions and promote implementation of CMMs, specifically focused on the port state measures. So these two examples shows how we lead and put importance on the efforts specifically to address IUU fishings in the different RFMOs. And we also make efforts to make new rules to improve our response to the IUU fishings. First one is the agreement on port state measures to prevent, deter, and eliminate IUU fishing. We have been actively involved in the negotiation phase, and this agreement entered into force in June 2016, and Japan, and it entered into force for Japan in 2017. This is the first international agreement focusing on an IUU, and we attach importance to this instrument. And to cover, and also in order to cover a region not covered by existing RFMOs, we have actively engaged in negotiations and ratified the agreement to prevent unregulated high seas fisheries in the Central Arctic Ocean in 2017. And thirdly, we have been actively advocated in different international fora and organizations to make a strong political call to strengthen our response to IUU fishings. Particularly, we attach importance to make such a political call at the leaders level, such as G20 Osaka Leaders Declaration. And at the working and operational level, in the APEC, we have led the discussion to adopt the APEC roadmap on combating IUU fishing. Next page, please. And to conclude my remarks, I'd like to explain what are the remaining challenges and what should be done more. Although, as I explained, political message at the highest level possible has increased in recent years, it has started very recently. So we have to further raise international community's awareness on this challenge. At the political level, we need to definitely mention and raise the issue at the various global and diplomatic agenda, particularly at the political leaders level, so as to pressure industry and those countries and those nations which are sort of overlooking IUU. And at the same time, we should also pursue engage such non-cooperating nations or entities, not to isolate them, but rather to engage in them, encourage them to be in the various instruments and organizations. And at the same time, it is extremely important to increase dialogue between relevant stakeholders, academia, and think tanks to raise international public awareness, not only in the intergovernmental level, but at the public level. And it is in this context that the initiatives such as this forum is extremely important, we believe. And such efforts, I believe, would contribute to the enhancement of data transparency and information exchanges among different governments and stakeholders. And the second action which should be pursued is to reinforce effectiveness of a port state measures agreement, which is the key which we believe the key to strengthen the global efforts to tackle IUU fisheries. Because once the more the ratification of the PSMA, the lesser the safe havens for the IUU fishing vessels. And so we have been, but we also continue to encourage non-contracting parties to join this agreement. And my last remark is to underline the need to continue to support capacity building of developing countries, which is the key to enhance monitoring, control, surveillance, and as a consequence to improve data sharing among the different partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nakamura, for highlighting Japan's diplomacy for promoting sustainable fisheries, eliminating IUU fishing, and achieving sustainable ocean. Your reference on this IUU fishing, the effective implementation of PSMA, and capacity development of developing countries. They are indeed very vital components, and I thank you for your presentations. Please allow us to get back to you. And next, I just wanted to introduce Dr. Hide Sakaguchi, President of the Ocean Policy Research Institute of the Sasakawa Peace Foundations, to make interventions. Dr. Sakaguchi, please.
Hey, thank you, Masanori. Good morning in Norway and good afternoon in Japan. First of all, I would like to reiterate our gratitude and appreciation to all those who have attended this two-day forum and today's session on sustainable fisheries and international partnership. And I also would like to show my sincere gratitude to Ambassador Nihamau and her staff for their great support to prepare and to organize this forum. I also thank Mr. Takashi Koya, Director General of the Fishery Agency, and Ms. Liv Holmfjord just made a great speech, the former National Director of Fisheries of Norway, and Mr. Kazuhiko Nakamura, Deputy Director General, Economic Affairs Bureau, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, just now mentioned, and to give us updates and share your sights and policy progress and challenges in achieving sustainable fisheries and eliminating illegal, unreported, unregulated IUU fishing, which are urgently essential topics for all over the world. As we all know here, Norway is always an important partner in terms of fisheries, particularly seafood trade for Japan. Norway is an important supplier of salmon for Japanese consumers. At not only any sushi restaurant, but also at major supermarkets, we can find a package of Norwegian beautiful and tasty salmon and mackerel a lot. In Norway, we can see sushi restaurant than before. That means, anyway, our two countries are connected by seafood culinary culture. And Japan and Norway are therefore destined to collaborate in promoting. Oh, no.
お知らせいたします。ただいまより皆様のお食事をお配りいたします。
I'm sorry, I'm stuck in a hotel for quarantine, and this is the announcement for the next meal. Sorry about that.
ドアを開けずにお待ちください。
And anyway, therefore, definitely collaborate. Oh, shut up.
ご待機中の皆様にお知らせいたします。ただいまより皆様のお食事をお
I
配
cannot
りいたし
switch
ま
out
す。
this speaker.
配り終わるまで少々お時間がかかりますが、次の放送があるまでドアを開けずにお待ちください。
Next.
May I have your attention, please?
Oh.
Okay, no. Maybe you can continue. I think we can hear your voice.
Okay.
Yeah, we understand that you are in self-isolation hotels near
Anyway.
Haneda Airport.
I repeat, Japan and Norway are therefore designated to collaborate in promoting sustainable fisheries, aquaculture, and seafood markets. I just want to add a few points following the slide shown in here. Firstly, I fully agree with Ms. Liv Holmfjord that we need to achieve sustainable fish stock management and enhance fishery productivity through enabling policies such as effective monitoring, control, surveillance, and enforcement, and sustain and enhance spawning biomass as a basis for sustainable fish stock management. What will trigger a change or a transition from a short-term fish catch maximization to long-term sustainable and high-valued fishery production? How can the government, industry, business, research institutions, and consumers play a role in such a process and build a network of like-minded stakeholders? This can be insight for achieving sustainable fisheries. And the next is, as Mr. Takashi Koya and Mr. Nakamura underlined, it is important to achieve the collective management of fish stocks with neighboring countries and international actions for achieving sustainable fisheries. Asia Pacific and Indian Ocean are important regions where both Japan and Norway can strengthen the efforts to facilitate policy and institutional transformation and international partnership for sustainable fisheries. The high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, our ocean panel, which is called now, was led by Professor Peter Hogan here today, will continue to play a role, and I myself hope to play a more instrumental role in contributing to the work of panel as a member of expert group and directing the Ocean Policy Research Institute as a member of the advisory network for the ocean panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sakaguchi. I forgot to mention that he came back from France yesterday after attending a 3-day One Ocean Summit convened by President Macron of France. And thank you for attending this from the hotel where he has to undergo 6 days quarantines after the arrival in Japan. Dr. Sakaguchi raised very important points, and I now would like to invite first maybe Ms. Liv Holmfjord. I think about this importance to promote multi-stakeholder partnership for achieving sustainable fisheries. We are a bit pressed by the time, but if you can respond to the presentation and the remarks by other speakers, I would be very much appreciated. May I invite Ms. Holmfjord to take the floor.
Thank you. And thank you for very interesting remarks, both on the big challenge we face in an international context, especially for shared fish stocks. As I said, our experience is that we need to work on several issues or dimensions at the same time, both the bilateral and also through the regional fisheries organizations and of course also the UN. We have to continue to develop the international sea law, and we have to also have more operative measures from day to day. And also we need to develop our own management at home before we go out and tell the rest of the world how they should act. So it's also important to be sure that we are combating IUU in our own waters, for example. So I think that, as I said, international cooperation, I think we can develop further the port state measure, which is also highly advocated from Norway, the exchange of data to be as transparent as possible. It's also, I think, something that we should continue to develop. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your reactions. I think this is very vital to promote multi-stakeholder partnership for sustainable fisheries. May I invite Mr. Koya to respond to some of the points raised by other speakers. I think people are also interested in knowing how Japan can move on this implementation of seafood traceability that you mentioned, this new legislation adopted 2020, the Act for Improvement of Seafood Distributions. I wonder if you can elaborate a bit more on the challenges and the key factors. Thank you.
はい、ありがとうございます。
Yes, thank you.
まず2つありまして、1つは、
There are 2 points that I'd like to make.
ですね、関係者の意思疎通をどうするかっていう。
What to do with better communication among those concerned.
これは科学的に正確な
scientifically accurate stock assessment and provision of transparent information to stakeholders and public accessibility to data have to be ensured. In other words, we have to ensure transparency in all the processes that will be involved. That will be of crucial importance, especially as we need to improve our efforts on stock management. I believe that is one of the most important aspects that we have to focus on. The second point is related to trade. That is the new act that was introduced. In the case of Japan, for tuna, the measures were decided by relevant RFMO, and according to that, for a particular species of tuna, the statistical data, the proof were called for submission, but for the first time, Japan took a unique initiative for import of fishery products from abroad to ensure traceability of those fishery products in the distribution channel in Japan. As we are still in the initial phase, the coverage of this act is limited to particular species. Eventually, we want to expand it to more species and all the species, but for now, it is sardine, mackerel, and sorry, and the flying squid. For import of those products, the exporting country has to submit the proof of catch, and that would be introduced into the system so that such fishery products would be traceable throughout the distribution channel. And this is going to be implemented in December this year. And in the process, mackerel and sardine, but it's more especially for mackerel, countries like Norway and EU are implementing the particular export measures, and that's what we are trying to learn from. And therefore, we are currently engaged in bilateral consultation with relevant countries. So that's all the additional information that I'd like to offer for now.
For underlining some of the additional elements, I'm pretty pleased that there will be a implementation for this registration regarding sardine, mackerel, sauri, and the flying squid as an initial step to enhance the seafood traceability and the seafood import. And I understand that Norway is one of the mentors for this legislation implementation. Thank you for your elaboration on this. So may I invite Mr. Nakamura? I think Mr. Nakamura mentioned a number of the international processes. I see this COVID-19 and online meetings maybe causing some impediment, but what are the processes you are looking at as important meetings and the negotiations for the forthcoming processes to achieve sustainable fisheries and eliminating IUU fishing? Maybe Mr. Nakamura, can I invite you to elaborate a bit more on this?
Yes. The first and foremost important thing we consider is to pursue our efforts to make the leaders level political call in various forums such as G7, G20, and APEC. So it is in this context that I'm working on to include the reference to the IUU fishing issues in the leaders communique in G7 and G20. And although more and more political level interest and concerns are expressed, but it's quite recent. As far as we know, it's only since 2018 that we have witnessed a rather frequent political message at this level. So we have to pursue such efforts, and particularly to put such political message into action in terms of data sharing and transparency, as well as the strengthening the law enforcement capacity in the affected developing countries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nakamura, for underlining the importance of APEC and other international meetings, and also data sharing and the law enforcement, a number of important parts underlined. Thank you very much. May I now invite Dr. Sakaguchi just to reflect on the responses from other speakers.
Okay. Again, I hope no more announce from the hotel, but I'd like to show my great many thanks to all the speakers and participants for joining today's Japan-Norway Sustainable Ocean Policy Forum 2022. And it was indeed success in having high-level multi-stakeholder policy dialogues on key policy issues for sustainable ocean. Yesterday, I was unfortunately in flight, but I heard you had rich discussions on sustainable ocean plans and marine spatial planning, so on. Today, we had very fruitful discussions on challenges for achieving sustainable fisheries and seafood markets. For both topics, international partnerships and collaborative actions are truly essential, as we discussed just this afternoon. And Japan and Norway need to play a leading role in such processes. This two-way forum was made possible by strong support and continuous encouragement of Ambassador Inge Nyhammer of Norway to Japan. Thank you very much in that sense. But as we all know, we face a similar, problem, and then a similar problem, can be solved. Collaboration. That's most important part. And each individual countries, sometimes is struggling, to solve the problem, but we can refer the solution to each other. So that is the most important part, and that is the most important result from those kind of bilateral meetings. So in that sense, I think both of us showed in some problematic part and the leading part, so we can refer leading part and solve the problematic part each other. So that is most important part. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sakaguchi. And once again, I'd like to ask all of you to give a big round of applause to Mr. Koya, Ms. Holmehol, Mr. Nakamura, and Dr. Sakaguchi for speaking at this keynote panel. Then next, may I invite the speakers of the following interactive panel. At the outset, I'd like to invite Professor Jan Peter Johnsen, University of Tromsø of Norway, to give us your perspectives for sustainable fisheries. May I invite Professor Johnsen to take the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation to participate here. I have a few reflections on what I've heard now this morning. I will share my screen with you. The issue we are discussing here is actually how to govern ungovernable objects, things that can't be governed, like fish, nature, and people. And just to sum up some of the lessons from what I've heard this morning, successful resource management is possible. We can control fish mortality and we can produce profit. It is possible to manage successfully in partnership with other coastal states. And it's also possible to achieve low conflict between fishers and managers, as we have experienced, for example, in Norway. We also see in Norway that fishing rights and quotas can be deployed in society's service. They are not necessarily a problem. They are actually instruments that we can use in a positive and constructive way. But we also see that by introducing such instruments, we see that there is an increasing complexity in the governance system, and costs related to governing, and also the knowledge needed to do it in a proper way is actually increasing. So it becomes a very complex system. And there is also another thing, is that most of the governance systems in the world are designed to manage natural systems with certain properties. And this has to be done through the specific political and administrative systems that exist in the different countries. So these experiences can be, and the models can be, difficult to transfer directly between countries, because there are actually different cultures and different ways of doing it. But there are some lessons that can be learned. In Norway, we see, go back to the 1920s. It was a lot of people, as Ms. Holmefjord showed us, a lot of fish, but they were not so effective. If we go to the 2019, 100 years later, the fishing fleet consists of very, very effective fishing vessels, a much, much lower number of people. And this has actually contributed to creating something that we can call governability. If you look to this figure, you will recognize all the components that Mrs. Holmefjord showed us. It's policy making. We have a management and administrative system that are making regulatory decisions. There are regulation and control mechanisms like quotas that are controlling what we can call the system to be governed. And there are science monitoring and giving feedback to the management, to the governing system. And when these components work together, also through consultation between stakeholders and the management system, we achieve what we can call governability. So the success factors here, in both in Japan and in Norway, I think, is that we have governing systems that have capacity to reach the goals that we expect from the system to be governed. And this governability is a product of the institutionalization of the instruments and the procedures. And this instrumentalization is actually a result of what we can call governmentality. Governmentality develops when a collective of people, managers or governors and stakeholders together share thoughts, images, ideas, rationalities, and beliefs in how we can manage the nature. So governability and governmentality depends on each other, and they are conditions for successful governance. And the reason why they are the success factors are that we are actually not governing fish or nature, we are governing people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Jonsen, for highlighting the important features. I think managing fish mortalities and profit is one of the basis, and the feedback of science and policy for achieving sustainable fishery is also underlining foundation as well. Thank you for your insight as well. So next, may I invite Professor Yutaka Michida, Professor, University of Tokyo, and a member of UNESCO International Oceanographic Commission. Please take a floor.
Thank you, Kobayashi-san. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank all of the conveners for the invitation to me to today's forum. With my deep apologies not to have been able to join yesterday and today's earlier the session today. Actually, yesterday I was asked to be a co-chair for the session of the International Ocean Data Conference being held in Sopot, Poland. The conference is partially related to the discussion at the forum, today's forum, as it covers oceanographic data and information sharing as an essential infrastructure for the ocean policy implementation. So could you share my slide on? Thank you. Yes, I was asked to share some ideas regarding the present status of the marine spatial planning in Japan. I think it is not directly addressing the issue of fisheries, but it's somehow related to the fisheries activities as well. Next slide, please. Yeah, as many of you have been aware of it, Japan adopted the Basic Act on Ocean Policy in 2007. And according to the clause of the Act, Japanese government is required to set basic plan of ocean policy and revise it every 5 years. The plan is very much comprehensive, covering all variety of the activities, mainly governmental activities related to the ocean. The current version of the plan is the third plan released in May 2018, and its next version will come up 2023. Marine spatial planning, MSP, has been included in its scope as a potential tool for better utilization and management of the coastal zone. But I should say it still stays in a conceptual level in Japan, or very much premature yet. Reflecting the steady and the strong trend for the marine renewable energy development in Japan, there have been some actions taken in terms of the revision or amendments of law and regulations. For example, Port and Harbor Act was amended in 2016 and 2019. So with regard to the infrastructure of marine spatial planning, marine data and information sharing systems have been continuously developed based on the series of basic plans for the last maybe 15 years. The first step of the data infrastructure, a metadata sharing system called Marine Information Clearinghouse, was constructed and has been operated by Japan Coast Guard since 2011. That provides the information of National Oceanographic Research Plan or survey plans and the cruise summary reports. Then in 2014, a marine cadastral was developed as a web-based WebGIS system to share static information, including socio-economic aspects. Further, in 2019, a marine data and information system called MDA, Maritime Domain Awareness MDA Situational Indication Linkages, was launched and has been operated by the Japan Coast Guard as a fully open data sharing system. Next one, please. Towards the MSP-like system, our research group in University of Tokyo published a guideline for consensus development in coastal zone utilization in 2017, like this, based on our research and the research of marine policy and the consensus making processes in Japan, and also the consensus development system in the United States. The mainly anticipated readers of the guideline are officials of local governments. Through these activities, one of the key findings is the importance of co-designing with fisheries activities and engagement of neutral sectors as a moderator in a series of discussions for the planning. A successful example we examined was the marine spatial planning for marine wind farm in Rhode Island, United States, where the fisheries community was deeply involved as a principal stakeholder from very beginning stage of the initiative. Next one, please. Yeah, as I mentioned before, that the MDS seasonal indication linkages are already prepared and ready to use for the baseline information system for the marine spatial planning in Japan. But marine spatial planning itself is not developed yet in Japan. Next, which is final slide. Yes, I attended the fourth Maritime Safety Planning Forum in Riga, Latvia in November 2019. I was only one participant from Japan and was very much impressed by the forum, where so active discussions were made among participants, and by the fact that the national marine spatial planning system has already been established in almost all European countries, and that their main discussion points or subjects are how they can coordinate national marine spatial planning with those in neighboring countries. More than 300 participants from more than 40 countries gathered to discuss and exchange views on MSP promotion. I was also really impressed by the fact that almost 50% of participants were younger than 40 years old. So the forum should be an incubating opportunity for next generation of such highly interdisciplinary research field. In this sense, I would say the further collaboration between Japan and Norway in promotion of marine spatial planning or marine spatial planning based management system is quite important, taking fully into account the sustainable fisheries activities or harmonization of fisheries activities and other activities. I would say Norway is running far advanced in marine spatial planning development in comparison with Japan. Japan will try to follow and catch up with the progress of these activities, so the further collaboration would be appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Michita, to try to link yesterday's discussion marine spatial planning with our fish stock management that we are discussing today. And we try to see how we can really use this marine spatial planning as one of the tools for achieving sustainable fisheries. Then let me invite Professor George Morishita, Tokyo University of Marine Science and Technology, to further address these sustainable fisheries. Professor Morishita, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Kobayashi-san, for inviting me to this very precious forum. And I did enjoy a lot of presentations, which are very informative. I'd like to touch upon two items in my short presentation. Yes, thank you very much. Could you just show the first opening? Yes. And first topic is ITQ question mark and system lessons from Norway. And topic 2 is Arctic and Antarctic issues. The intention of my presentation is topic 1 is something related to mutual learning about the fisheries, the sustainable fisheries management in Japan and Norway. So this is about our domestic fisheries in a sense. And topic 2 is a larger global, in this case, polar fisheries issues, which sustainability and conservation is very important. So this is a topic that we can talk about the cooperation between Japan and Norway in a global discussion forum. So maybe time is limited, but let me just try to cover those two topics in my presentation. Norway is oftentimes seen as a front runner of sustainable fisheries management, and a lot of success stories are reported in Japan. At the same time, I like to argue that we can learn a lot from each other, but at the same time, we shouldn't just copy what others are doing into our own situation. Meaning that we have to know our own domestic situation and think about how we can apply and adjust the success stories in the other countries, in this case, between Japan and Norway. The Norway's success story is oftentimes seen as a success of a IQ individual quota system. Part of a TAC total allowable catch is allocated to individual the fishermen or fishing vessels. And also ITQ individual transferable quota system is also seen as a very effective tool for making fishery activities as profitable. There are some misunderstanding that Norway system is ITQ system, which is not. The Norwegian system is the vessel quota regime. It's individual vessel quota system, IVQ. And this is specifically tried to avoid market-based transaction of quotas. It's based on ownership by fishing vessels, so that the basic system or basic structure of fisheries could be maintained. Let's look at what happened in relation to the introduction of IVQ system. The lower left-hand side, this is the graph indicate the change of a catch amount as already presented. Sorry about mixture of Japanese and English. In 1990, the IVQ system was introduced. And as you can see, after that, the fishery seems to be picking up its catch, but generally staying stable level of catch. At the same time, on the right-hand side, we can see, especially in the top one, we see the number of fishing vessels as well as the number of fishermen has decreased substantially. But I like to draw your attention that the decrease has already started before the introduction of an individual vessel quota system. We also see the each vessels or fishing vessels in Norway has become bigger and stronger in terms of horsepower and its size. So is this simply because of IBQ system? This is one of the questions I just like to throw out. And also my next question is, can we just copy this system into Japanese fishing situations? We all know that Japan has a very diverse fishing situations. It might be surprising for some people that we hear, well, first of all, let me say Japan's fishery catch has been decreasing very quickly for a long time, since the 80s. And the number of our fishermen has also decreased very quickly. And over 38% of our fishermen is over the age of 65. I should say that 88% or more of a Japanese fishing vessel is smaller than 10 metric tons. And the 95% of a fishery is actually coastal fisheries. Should we introduce a system where we may be seeing the decrease of a fishermen, and also can we see, or do we like to see the larger and stronger fishing vessels? Actually, the substantial change to Japanese fisheries law was made in the last few years, and the main target is actually, as long as those IQ system is concerned, is offshore and pelagic or high seas fisheries. And there are mixed discussions. Sometimes when you are talking about fisheries, many people just mean the large scale fisheries. But the large part of Japanese fisheries are, as I said, is small scale and done by a huge number of small vessels and the aging population of fishermen, which is decreasing. Can we just simply copy the situation or measures or success story of Norway to this part of Japanese fisheries? This is something we all have to think about. Probably what I'm thinking about is that when we talk about governability or governance of fisheries, we also have to know what we are governing and what a subject we are actually handling. This is my first part of a presentation. Next slide, please. Second one is our cooperation in a global field. Japan and Norway are both very active and important player in Arctic and Antarctic fisheries governance system. In Arctic, a new fisheries agreement to prevent IUU has introduced and came into force just last year. In Antarctic, there is an organization called CAMLR, Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, since the 80s. Their situation is very different, but at the same time, they share the same basic character of polar fisheries. Especially, I like to pick up the situation in Antarctic. In this case, related to the issue of the NPAs or area-based management measures, which was the subject of a discussion yesterday and part of the discussion today. Next slide, please. CAMLR, the Antarctic Marine Living Resources Organization, has a plan of introducing a series of MPAs around Antarctic continent. Already 2 MPAs are introduced. The more famous one is the MPA in Ross Sea, which was introduced in 2016. This is a large area, but surprisingly, maybe for some people, this is not no-take zone. In some areas, they introduce no-take zone. In other areas, they have a dedicated fisheries research areas. And some of fishing activities displaced by the introduction of a no-take zone were moved to other fishing areas and allocated the new fishing quota. So there are definitely balance between sustainable use and the conservation of marine environment, as long as what CAMLR is doing. And now CAMLR has 3 standing MPA proposals, which are subject to discussion for some time. One of them is from Norway. This is called the Weather Sea MPA Proposal Phase 2. And this is area that Japan and Norway can cooperate very closely. So at this occasion, I like to emphasize that our need and encourage our cooperation for this particular proposal from Norway in CAMLR. Japan's research and exploratory fishing activities are actually conducted in this very area where Norway is proposing the Weather Sea MPA. And both Japan and Norway is a country which, depending on fishery, as well as committed to the conservation of a marine environment. So this is one very good example that we can cooperate and show to the world that we can achieve a very positive result, taking the balance between conservation and sustainable of fisheries. So that is very quick presentation of mine, and I'm looking forward to some further discussion today as related to those presentations, as well as other presentations. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Professor Morishita, for highlighting some of the key important part. I think this individual vessel quotas and the Weather Sea a useful example for us to consider collaborations. Let us get back to you. I'm sure that Professor Jonsson and also maybe Ms. Holmford may have further feedback on these issues. I have now pleasure to introduce Mr. Kenji Matsunaga, President Meho Fishery Co., to give us his experience. They one of the instrumental fishery company that have acquired MSC for their pole line fishing, and I think they can shed the light on Japan's fishery activities. May I invite Mr. Matsunaga to take a floor. 松永さん、よろしくお願いします。
はい、よろしくお願いいたします。
Thank you very much. My name is Matsunaga. It's a great pleasure for me to join you today. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you. Let me just briefly introduce our company. Well, as we didn't start as fishers, but in Shiogama, a city in Miyagi Prefecture, we started as a processor of frozen bonito 30 years ago. You may not be very familiar with this, whether you are Japanese or the people in other country, but the Miyagi Prefecture is known for a large catch of bonito. But the frozen bonito wasn't a major part of the large catch of bonito. But we started as a company which processes frozen bonito fish about 30 years ago. The total amount we handled was rather limited, but the Great East Japan earthquake hit us, and as a result, the amount of the bonito fish we handled in Shiogama further shrunk. And that really undermined or threatened our organization. And then, in order to survive, we branched out into fisheries operation as well. And well, even before I had experience of working as the sales rep for a fishing fish company, so I had been familiar with the MSC. But MSC didn't come to me when we started started fishing. We just simply wanted to work hard. And when I was in Tokyo one day for sales operations, I had some time to spend, and I searched the word MSC on my phone and cell phone, and then I found out that I was near the MSC office in Tokyo, and I found myself making a phone call to that office, and I was there and talking with the people there, and that oriented me into MSC, and it took me about 2 years since then, but we successfully obtained the MSC certification in October 2016. For us, we go out to the far to the offshore, so that is about that takes about 1 week to reach the fishing zone, and about 1 week to come back to the port, and with 300 to 400 tons each time. So each the fishing expedition takes about at least a week, a month. So the catch needs to be frozen on board. So fish is frozen while it's alive. So the fish mouth is open. That prove that the evidence of the freshness, highly fresh catch, even though it doesn't look like so. You may think that the fish looks surprised with the open mouth, but we process fish without thawing it. So the fish, frozen fish, is thawed only the customers obtains it. So the freshness is obtained and it's kept very highly. And if you fail in the proper thawing, then the quality goes down. This is my final part of my presentation, but in Japan these days in particular, the population is shrinking, and the demand for fish and the fish product is also declining. Whereas demand looks to go up in other countries, and the popularity of sashimi and sushi will continue to grow for the United States or other countries. And but we obtained the EU HACCP at our factory, and we hope to export a product to the EU as well. Of course, we are familiar with Norwegian salmon in Japan, but bonito and the long-tail, the albacore, the tuna, caught in Japan or caught by Japanese fishing boats, could be exported, and so that we can enjoy their fair pricing. That would be very important to start and continue sustainable fishing activities. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Matsunaga.
For your presentations. I think your techniques of instant freezing and also defrosting to maintain the freshness of skipjack and albacore seems to be very important. And I noted your aspirations to enter and expand your seafood distribution in the United States and Europe, including Norway. Thank you for your presentations. So next, may I invite Mr. Tetsuji Ida, senior staff writer and editorial editor of the Kyoto News Agency, to give us your perspectives for sustainable fisheries. May I invite Mr. Ida to take the floor.
Sorry, I'm in mute. My name is Tetsuji Ida from Kyoto News. I've been working for environment issue nearly 40 years, and the sustainability of fisheries is one of my important subject. And thank you so much for inviting me. And can you share my slides? Yes. Next, please. Next one, please. And yeah, this is my news stories filed on last August and appear on Japanese newspapers and some newspapers internationally. The story said that UK-based environmental group called Environment Justice Foundation conducted research nearly 5 years. It's a great effort, and found daily IUU activities and human rights violation on many Chinese tuna and shark vessels all over the world. And by satellite tracking, they found some tuna products from these Chinese vessels were brought into Japanese market through major companies like Mitsubishi and other companies, and went into Japanese market. This next one, please. These findings mean that IUU is rampant in Japanese waters, and we Japanese are consuming huge amount of IUU seafood products very frequently and without knowing it. As you know that in recent days, EU and the US are taking robust measures to prevent IUU products going to their market. However, I have to say that the Japanese government measures is far late behind these countries. And this allows IUU seafood market to remain in Japan. And because of the government insufficient action, industry's effort to know and disclose what's happening in the overseas supply chain is not enough. So I can say that there is a huge risk for IUU products kicked out from other developed nations market. The EU and United States will flow into Japanese market, and the risks are growing, I think. As the Koya-san told us just now, the government of Japan recent action to enact the new act to the control the seafood market and import to Japanese market. I think this is a positive step to tackle this issue. However, as Koya-san told us, the government of Japan is considering only 3 species in domestic market, abalone, sea cucumber, and grass eel, and only 4 species internationally. And considering the huge market size of tuna, squid, shrimp, and prawn, salmon, trout, and so on, this is far enough. I think this is an important step forward, but it is very, very tiny step. And the scope of this act is too much inward looking, I think, and then I have to say that not facing the reality of global seafood market and relating IUU risk globally, I have to say. So that widening the scope of this act to virtually all of the important imported species is urgently needed, I think. This is a huge task for Japanese government, also the Japanese fishermen. And just one more thing that Nakamura-san pointed out just now, the human rights violation on high seas fisheries very serious, as you know. And like my report indicates that sometimes it's called outlaw ocean. And that means that I think we need to watch carefully, not only resource basis, resource management, sustainability, but also these social issues like human rights violation, slave labor, child labor, and governance issue of stakeholders too. So because in many cases, IUU and human rights violation come together, they hands in hands. So human rights due diligence in seafood industry in most of Japanese company is very much insufficient. And I think in this area, we have to do a lot of things to do. And lastly, I want to congratulate the Meiho Sange's activity to take MSCs. MSC is very important to make Japanese fisheries, seafood industry sustainable. But unfortunately, for a long time, many of the Japanese fisheries, fishing companies are not so much interested in global or sustainability certificate system like MSC, MSC, and ASC. And that's a huge problem. That is also the problem for our Japanese fishing industries. So in that sense, I congratulate Matsunaga-san's effort. And it's very nice to have you here and have you listen your experience from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ida. So we have listened to the Japanese speakers highlighting the achievement and challenges for sustainable fisheries, and also noted, I think Mr. Ida was underlining the importance of effective implementation for requiring a fish catch certification for many species urgently. And then Professor Morishita mentioned this individual vessel reporters and weather sea MPA proposal in Antarctica. And Professor Michita also relates that to the marine spatial planning. We are a bit pressed by the time, but maybe it's good to get some reactions from Professor Jonsen. And if Ms. Holmjold is still with us, maybe it's nice to get her feedback as well. So first, I may invite Professor Jonsen to react to some of the points raised by other panelists.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, very interesting talks from everybody here. To Professor Morishita, I completely agree with you that we cannot copy systems. That was also my point. We have to design our systems in relation to where we are. So that's the first thing. But you asked a question about the Norwegian IVQ system and whether that was the reason why we got a decline in numbers of boats and fishers. And I would say that is a clear answer to that. That's no. Because as you pointed out, the decline started before. So before the system. So what the system actually has done, it has been an attempt to try to control the downsizing in a reasonable and rational way to avoid bankruptcies and uncontrolled downsizing in a way. So I think that is my answer to that. I also totally agree with the comments here on IUU fishing. That IUU fishing is maybe it cannot be combated only out at the sea. It actually has to be combated on land by looking into fairness, equity, social welfare, and things like that. So people are not forced to enter into industries and businesses and take up maybe very low paid jobs. Finally, also and also a comment on the marine spatial planning. I think that's interesting, but there is a slight problem here because for the fishermen, MSP is regarded more as a conservation tool than actually a fisheries management tool. And I think that if we want to work with fishermen on MSPs, we actually have to motivate them and prove what is in it for them also. I also very much enjoyed the presentation from the practitioner here, and that we got some real insight from from the industry and how the industry work with the certification and try to cope with different schemes. And I think that is necessary to also to get the kind of labeling of the sustainability is actually necessary to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Yong-san. I think we have to design the measures that are tailored to meet the specific conditions of the Japan and also maybe Japanese sea areas as well. I wonder if Ms. Holmyo, if you have any quick reactions to any of the point.
I think Professor Johnson had very good comments, so I don't think I have anything to add now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Holmyo. Then maybe I invite the Japanese panelists to make quick reactions. First, maybe Professor Michida.
Yeah, thank you, Kobayashi-san. I have enjoyed to listen to all the talks, and I was really encouraged in promoting the marine spatial planning in Japan, because that will be the powerful tool for the sustainable fisheries as well. And with regard to the comment by Dr. John, the marine spatial planning previously was just the conservation tool, but now the very strong trend, the shifting the function of the marine spatial planning from just a conservation tool to the real management tool. So Japan has not yet started the marine spatial planning yet, but my feeling is that the Japan should develop the marine spatial planning in line with the real management tool, right? So that is my comment or reaction to the comment on the marine spatial planning. And one more thing I'd like to mention is that the last year we started the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. So one of the societal outcomes of the decade is productive ocean. So which is of course in line with the sustainable fisheries, and hopefully together with the sustainable management of the coastal zone, and in a harmonized way with the fisheries activity in the coastal area, not only in Japan, in Norway and all other part of the ocean in the world. So finally, I'd like to ask the Norwegian colleagues to keep contact with all of us in the related activities, including the research and the development of management tools. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Michida. Certainly, we promote a collaboration between stakeholders and experts of two countries. May I invite Professor Morishita to make a quick comments at this juncture.
Thank you. I just like to thank Professor Johnson for his reply. And it was clear that not a single system or single measure can resolve the situation or promote the sustainability or governability as a whole. And my understanding of success of a Norwegian case is also to have more transparency, wider stakeholder participation, rather than a top-down order to a fisherman to change their behavior. And also the safety of a fisherman or good living of fishermen are also given a very high respect, rather than simply try to improve the economic efficiency overfishing activities. So there are a lot of things we can learn from Norwegian the experience. And again, my point is whether or what we can actually take the lessons from Norway into Japanese situation. And my understanding is for offshore fisheries and the high seas fisheries in Japan, the reduction of overcapacity as well as increase the efficiency of their activities are important, so that to make that industry more profitable. At the same time, for the Japanese coastal fisheries, the situation is very different. And like I said, a large number of fishermen are engaged in coastal fisheries. And if we decrease their number too much, that means we might see the collapse of coastal communities, which is an integral part of the Japanese local places. And also, when we reduce the number of fishermen to increase efficiency, what happens to those replaced fishermen? If they are young enough, we can retrain them for other industries. But if more than around 40% is the age more than 65, we cannot use that same scenario. So that is some additional observation I'd like to throw out. And at the same time, also we need to understand that the Japanese marine ecosystem is quite different from that of Norway. The 80% of Norwegians' total catch is coming from 5 species. And the 80% of the Japanese total catch is coming from 20 different species. And we have many mixed fisheries, where TAC and IQ system is very difficult, if not impossible, to introduce. So I would appreciate if you have some insight about the situation and what we can do. I would appreciate that very much. But I just like to throw out those differences so that we have many things to think about in introducing measures and think about sustainability and governability. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Morishita, for raising a number of issues for our future considerations. We look forward to addressing these in partnership with Norwegian expert. May I invite Mr. Matsunaga to say anything before we conclude. Matsunaga-san, お願いします。
現場サイドからするとですね。
Thank you very much. From the perspective of the ground, yes, there are rules to comply, but in addition, we have so many difficulties and the challenges to address. So day-to-day survival is the primary issue for us. But we need to start whatever we need to do in order to preserve and protect the resources. We want to protect resources, but what we can do is rather limited. But the MSC certification is therefore important in order to ensure fair price for us.
Assurance is indeed very much important. May I invite Mr. Ida to add anything at this juncture?
Yeah, I know that time is limited. I'll be very much quick. I'm reporting fisheries issue quite a long time. And unfortunately, I have to say that the government and fishermen and companies have not paid much attention to the sustainability of fisheries quite a long time. And because of that, the gap between the international trend has widened last decades. But we, as we had today, that the government beginning to change, and also the fishermen beginning to change, like we can find an eminent fisherman like Matsunaga-san. It's very nice to see. It's very nice to know that. But we need to the task, as I told you, that task before us is mounting, and we need to scale up this effort. We should be very much quick. In that sense, that we can learn a lot from Norway's experience. And this is, for me, it is very important. It's very nice experience to be a member of this panel. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We have to scale up our actions for sustainable fisheries. Just to say that we have received a number of questions and comments, and we will share them with panelists and hope to give a further feedback to you through our website. We have also received a request for the presentation materials with permission of the speakers. We will also try to make them available to you through our website as well. So once again, thank you, and let's give a big round of applause to the panelists of this interactive panel. Thank you very much. So now, before we conclude, I have a pleasure to invite Dr. Hide Sakaguchi, President of the Ocean Policy Research Institute of the Sasakawa Peace Foundations, to make concluding remarks for today. And actually, we had a 2-day sessions, so any future perspectives for our future collaboration with Norwegian colleagues, I think it will be also very much useful. So may I invite now Dr. Hide Sakaguchi to make concluding remarks.
Now, I'm going to say thank you very much for your tremendous effort for last 2 days. And another thing is we human beings have conquered, many difficulties in our history, like infectious disease, cholera, and also air pollution, and these kind of things we have faced. And, thinking about sustainability still has, in a very short history. Likewise, for example, in Japan, gold mining was really hot in, more than 100 years ago, but now it's completely gone because they didn't know the sustainability, the concept of sustainability. But now, both two countries, Norway and Japan, seriously interact and mutually exchange information and the techniques. So, as both Professor Johnson and also Professor Morishita mentioned, there is still no quick, complete solution. But we need to accumulate the conversation like this and also, exchange information. So this is the most important issues. So I thank you very much for your effort in last 2 days. And the one thing I would like to announce is, as a leader, Ambassador Inga Nihamau, as a chairman of the organizing committee, to form the Norway-Japan Sustainable Ocean Fest in this coming April. That is not only for professional, but it's for more general purpose. But these kind of event attract people and tell something important for sustainable ocean. This is a very important message. Together with the effort of the yacht club I'm belonging to, and also Ocean Policy Research Institute. And also in September, this coming September, the Norwegian big tall ship, the Statslat Lemko, is coming into Yokohama on the way of One Ocean expedition. And this is the first time in the long history of Japan in 2000 years to welcome Norway tall ship. And it brings people, but not only people, but it brings some new era to connect Norway and Japan and think about ocean and also fisheries and do these kind of things. So this year is a really memorable year in between Norway and Japan. So if you're interested in, please take a look or ask someone about the result of those events. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sakaguchi, for your remarks. And we have a lot to look forward to in connection with Japan-Norway partnership, including the festival in April and the arrival of Norwegian ship this summer. Yesterday on Valentine's Day, Norwegian and Japanese ski jumpers made a big jump in Beijing. And I hope we can continue to make a big jump for sustainable ocean and fisheries. Once again, thank you very much for your attendance, participation, and support and cooperation. Look forward to having another occasions very soon. Thank you very much.